Talking with Jerry.
All right, Jared, it's time for another story here. And I was thinking,
Yep.
man, you had a very interesting career working in education, teaching undergrads, working in the New York City public schools, running tutoring and educational programs, and working with the world-renowned Boys and Girls Choir of Harlem. Now, you have many stories of working, but share one of your memorable performing experiences with these students.
Sure. There were a lot of opportunities that we had over the years, and really it's a dream for young people to perform for presidents. We performed for two presidents, Clinton and Bush Sr., performed for kings and queens, all types of celebrities, and at all kind of events all over the United States. But in terms of artists, performing with everyone from Aretha Franklin to Stevie Wonder, Kenny G, doing Puffy's birthday party. I can go on and on. But there were two memorable experiences. One people could see is on YouTube, and that was after the 9/11 tragedy of the attacks on the World Trade Center. We got to perform at Yankee Stadium for the tribute and the gathering together of Americans saying that we're strong and we're going to withstand what had just happened to us. But one that
That was the first game, by the way, wasn't it? Back to baseball.
yeah, no, that was kind of like reopening the city. We're not going to let anything slow us down. But it was as a nation, because President Bush W was there himself, and that was to tell America that we're moving on, that we're strong enough, we're resilient. But what was memorable to me as a performance was when I was directly involved in was with one of my favorite artists from back in the day, Mr. Paul McCartney. Of course, he's one of the Beatles. And a call came into the school that and I got a call from the principal, Mr. Robo, can you come down to my office? I've got this fantastic opportunity for us. I go downstairs and she says, Paul McCartney's going to be at the Apollo. I got a call. Can we pull something together to back him up? And I said, sure. When? I'm thinking later in the week. She said, it's for tonight. I'm like, tonight, like today? And she says, yes. I already told him we could do this, and his musical director will be over here in the next half hour. That he's performing at the Apollo tonight for an exclusive event with Sirius XM Radio. And I'm counting on you. Can we get a group of students together who they can rehearse with his musical director and, do this performance tonight? So I said, okay, we're going to make this happen. We aren't going to blow this up.
Whoa. Jerry, do you know what you're doing here, man? So the performance is the same day, and you have no time to prepare. How did this turn out? Come on, give it to us.
All right, so this is a fun story and one that I enjoy telling people. So I immediately go upstairs to the third floor. I said I'm mostly going to pull all high school students. There were a few middle school students, and I tell them what we're going to be doing. I get them into one of the music rooms. I get one of my musical instructors, and unfortunately, when I start to tell them who we're performing with, they didn't know who Paul McCartney was. Now, this is before students had cell phones. So a few kids did, but like Google wasn't what it is today. And they're like, Paul McCartney, who's... So I'm like in shock. So I said, oh, now I got a big problem. They don't even know who he is. Then I said, oh, wait a minute. You might know him. He was a member of the group, the Beatles. And then one of the students says, Mr. Roebuck, the Beatles? Who were the Beatles? And I said, oh my God, what did I do? So I have somebody, run downstairs. We get on the computer, print, like 25 copies or whatever out of information on Paul McCartney. So I'm watching the clock. I give it out to all the students. I said, listen, read this before we even start to rehearse. And I had the lyrics to the song that they wanted us to do, which was Simply Having a Wonderful Christmas Time. That's the song that he wanted a choir to sing. So then they're getting excited. Oh, wow, this guy is big. Oh, yeah, this group. I thought I heard of them. They were like one of the biggest groups. And, I heard my parents talk about them and blah, blah, blah. And I'm telling them about that, they were British and when they were on the Ed Sullivan Show. Anyway, eventually his musical director comes over. And I was able, in the meantime, to get a musical version of the song off of the computer and let them hear it. And they were like, oh, this is a nice song. And they started to sing, and they were like, within the second time of playing it, they were getting the notes, they were in tune, they were locked in. So the musical director comes over, and we start kicking it for a few minutes. And then he said, all right, well, let's get busy because the performance is tonight. And I got to get back over to the Apollo. So he sits down at the piano, and by the second take, this guy's all smiles. He's like, these kids are unbelievable. He said, this is going to happen. Like he's more excited than I am. So he says, listen, can you guys get over to the Apollo to rehearse with Mr. McCartney within the next hour and a half? So I said, yeah, I could, make that happen. So he leaves. I, get the kids together, boom, 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 and we walk over to the Apollo. So the school is 128th, as you know, off Madison. The Apollo is 125th off of between 7th and 8th. So it's only like a 4.5 block walk. So we get there, and fortunately, my PTA president was a stagehand at the Apollo Theater. So he's like, Mr. Rubber, what are you doing here with us? I said, we're going to be performing tonight with Paul. He's like, oh, man, this is great. So he gives us the VIP treatment. We go in. No sign of Paul McCartney. So we're in this waiting area. And then we start to hear him rehearsing. We hear his band. And he's going through the numbers that he's going to do, which is because he loves Motown. He's going to do some Smokey Robinson songs. He's going to do some old school R&B stuff. Then he's going to go into classic Beatles stuff, everything from Let It Be, Strawberry Fields. And then he's going to do his when he was in Wings, his group when he first left the Beatles. Then he's going to do the Paul McCartney stuff. And, so the students are listening to his music, which these songs they've never heard. And they're like, oh, wow, this is, because they're right there. But we don't see him. So finally the musical director comes. He said, okay, I'm taking you out to the front or the back of the Apollo and where the seating areas, and we're going to walk up on stage. You're going to meet Mr. McCarthy, and then you're going to stand behind him, and we're going to go through the song. We see how many takes we need till it's perfect. So I line them up, and they are each stepping up on the Apollo stage, and Paul is standing right there, and he's shaking their hand, and he's so gracious. He's shaking their hand. I don't know what he's saying to them because I'm several feet away. And they're each going, and I'm last in line. So after the last student goes, I walk up on stage, and he says, who are you? And I introduced myself. And then I said, I'm a big fan of your music. And I don't know what it was. I guess I looked a lot younger. He said, that's impossible. I said, no. I grew up with your music. When you guys were on the Apollo, on Ed Sullivan, everybody was talking about it. And I went to a school where I was the only black student, and I used to take Motown music down for the white kids to hear. And your music, I was able to hear my fellow students in school who were white, who loved the Beatles, and bring it back uptown for the kids in Harlem to hear. And when you came to perform on the Ed Sullivan Show, you stayed at the Statler Hilton Hotel, which was on my way home from school, because I went to school on 33rd Street and the hotel was on 34th Street across from the Penn Central Station. I used to go back uptown. So when I get out of school that day, there's tens of thousands of teenagers, you might remember this, in front of the hotel to see the Beatles. And I'm telling him this, and he just starts smiling. And he said, that is a fantastic story that you would be able to be here with me today, but you remember as a child, as a young person, when I
Yeah.
first came. So he got a kick out of that. He shook my hand and everything, and then the kids got behind him, and they went through the song 2 times, and he was like, "I can't believe these kids. You're ready to go into a recording studio with me. You got it down pat. This is perfect." So we then are exiting the stage. Now, there were 2 other performers with him that were performing that night. And after you did your rehearsal with Paul McCartney, you had to leave inside of the Apollo. He wouldn't let you stay in the theater, right?
Right.
We walk off stage and he says, "Hey kids, how would you like to stay and see the rest of my rehearsal today for the show tonight?" And they're like, "Oh, hell yeah." So I sit them down, and now I'm in the front row in the middle seat at the Apollo, and Paul McCartney is right in front of me on stage performing to me and like 20 of my kids. And I couldn't believe it. So I called, I know you know Mark Neiman from Kiss FM, and I said, "Mark, you'll never believe where I am." I said, "I'm at the Apollo Theater. I'm looking at Paul McCartney. He's performing for me and 20 other people, and I'm right in front of him." And he's like, "Oh my God, you got to tape this." But they had said no pictures and no videotaping. So that was like just something that was out of this world. So after he finishes his set, I get the kids and we're leaving to go out the front door into the lobby of the Apollo. And now the principal, Doctor, I don't want to give her last name, she's come over and she said, "Oh, Mr. Roebuck, how did everything go?" I said, "Oh, everything is fantastic. Mr. McCartney's very excited. The kids are excited, even though they didn't know who he was before." And his road manager comes up to me. He says, "Oh, you guys did great. Paul is really excited." And he says, "Where are you going?" I says, "Well, I'm taking the kids back to the school. By the time we get back, the school day is over, but I have to do this with it." He says, "No, I can't have them leave the theater. They can't leave." I said, "But I have to get them dressed. We need to see what we have over at the school. It's a Christmas show. They need something white and red." He says, "I can't lose these kids." I said, "No, these are good kids. They're not going to disappear." He says, "I know there's stores I see all up and down here on 125th Street. Why don't you go buy them whatever you need?" And I said, "Seriously?" So I said, "Well, I got to feed them too." He says, "Well, we don't have enough food for them to eat with the caterer." I said, "Well, wait a minute. I know Van Woods, his mom owns Sylvia's Restaurant that's 3 blocks from here. Let me make a call." So I called Van, and I said, "Van, I got about 24 kids. I'll probably have 4 adults. I need dinner at such and such a time tonight. What would you charge me?" So he tells me how many thousands, whatever. So the principal is looking at me. She says, "Mr. Roebuck, you can't ask them for this money. You're going to ask them for clothes and this." I said, "Listen, leave me alone. I got this. Miss Paul McCartney has plenty of money." So I turned to the road manager. I said, "If you give me about 5,000, I think that would handle it." So her eyes go wide open. She looks like her hair is going to explode. She said, "Are you crazy?" She's like, "She's kicking my foot. What are you doing?" So he looks at me. He says, "Okay." And he disappears. She said, "You can't ask them for 5,000. I said, "Listen, we're performing for free. Whatever. This is exposure for us, but whatever." So he comes back downstairs out of the office and he hands me $5,000 in cash. But first, before he handed it to me, the principal goes, "Wait a minute. I really don't want to, make any issue about the money. What's the budget that you have to work with?" And he looked at her with this look of amazement and said, "Excuse me, budget? What budget? This is Sir Paul McCartney. There is no budget."
It's like this entertainment with Paul.
Right. So he hands me the money, and she's like, I can't believe you did this. This is unbelievable." I said, "Well, this is the entertainment business." So I said, "Doctor," and once again, I'm going to say her last name. I said, "Oh, I'm not through yet." She said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, tomorrow when we get back to school, I have his manager's number. I'm going to write a letter and ask for a donation." "Are you crazy?" I said, "No, just you'll see." So anyway, we do the performance, and everybody was there. Howard Stern, all the news people, Tom Brokaw. I mean, I think Martha Stewart was there. I mean, every major person was like a celebrity because this was a private event, at the Apollo.
Paul don't come through all the time.
Right, to play the Apollo Theater. So it was just fantastic, and the kids had a blast. So the next day I come in, and as soon as I have a moment, I go down to our office and said, "Okay, let's work on that letter." So she said, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah, we're going to ask for money. Here's the business card." So we send the letter off, and it wasn't even a week, Cal, not even a week. And she called me, said, "Come downstairs." And there was a nice check.
Wow.
Donated
Wow.
to the Boys and Girls Choir Harlem. So, that was a fantastic story. Something that just came out of the blue. And for me...
But Jerry, the reason why I enjoy this story so much, the kids got an experience.
Mm-hmm.
You were a fan of the Beatles, okay? And that makes you a fan of Paul. You are Star's homeboy of the Apollo. You had an exclusive performance done for you and your kids at the Apollo, man.
Yep. So there's like I said, there's a lot of great memories, but in terms of performing with one of the biggest icons in the history of music, it's almost no one that has written it other than, of course, his partner John Lennon, who's deceased. That as a writing team, the amount of songs that they wrote, what they're publishing his work, the fact that he was crowned by the King and Queen of England, Sir Paul McCartney, and that this guy has been performing since the 1960s, and he could still sell out stadiums. You go to his concerts, and you have the grandmother, right? Yeah, you got the grandparents, their children, and they bring in their teenage children. So you're seeing 3 generations of people go to see him, and he's selling out stadiums to this day. So that was a memorable story with no new music, So it tells
he's a white Frankie Beverly.
He's a white Frankie Beverly. So it goes to show you that good music lasts forever. And that's another great story. I've got a lot more to tell. That's why I want you to like and subscribe. Talk with Jerry, and I'll see you next time.